It started like any other day in Long Beach, California, a sunny afternoon with a cool breeze sweeping through the streets. The neighborhood was alive with the usual rhythm of life, kids laughing as they rode their bikes, neighbors exchanging greetings on their porches, and shop owners waving at familiar faces. For Snoop Dogg, this was home, a place that held his roots and countless memories. Dressed in a simple Long Beach hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, Snoop decided to stop by the local corner store to pick up a few items for his mom's famous Sunday dinner. Despite his global fame, he loved moments like these, quiet, ordinary, and full of connection with the people who had been part of his life long before the world knew his name. The corner store was bustling, shelves lined with everyday essentials, the faint hum of the refrigerator units mixing with the chatter of customers. Snoop moved through the aisles with ease, offering warm nods and smiles to those who recognized him. His presence was calm, unassuming, just another neighbor doing his shopping. But near the dairy section, the peaceful hum of the store was disrupted. An elderly woman, later identified as Mrs. Harper, stood with her cart, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She was in her late 70s, her silver hair neatly styled, and her demeanor carried an air of impatience. She seemed harmless at first glance, just another shopper adjusting her wide-brimmed hat and muttering to herself. However, when Snoop approached the same aisle, reaching for a carton of milk, Mrs. Harper's expression shifted. Her gaze hardened, and before anyone could react, she spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "People like you don't belong here," she said, her voice sharp and laced with disdain. "Why don't you leave our town and go back to where you came from?" The air in the store seemed to freeze. Conversations stopped. Carts halted mid-aisle, and all eyes turned toward Snoop. A heavy silence fell over the room, the kind that makes time feel as though it's standing still. Snoop's hand paused in mid-reach. He slowly turned to face Mrs. Harper, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of her words. The tension in the air was palpable, and the onlookers watched with bated breath, unsure of what would happen next. Mrs. Harper stood firm, her chin lifted in defiance. Her words were not just an attack. They were a challenge, a deliberate attempt to provoke. For a moment, Snoop said nothing. He took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch. His mind raced with 1,000 possible responses, but he knew this moment called for something more than anger. It called for grace, strength, and a message that would resonate far beyond the walls of the store. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Ma'am," he began, his tone measured and deliberate, "do you even realize what you're saying?" Mrs. Harper's lips tightened, but she didn't back down. "I said what I said," she snapped. "This is my country. People like you don't belong here." Snoop nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "All right," he said, setting his basket down. "Let's talk about that. Let me tell you where I come from." The crowd that had gathered around was now fully engrossed, their eyes fixed on Snoop. Even those who had initially tried to avoid the confrontation found themselves drawn in by the weight of the moment. "I come from right here," Snoop began, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable power. "Long Beach is my home. My great-grandparents helped build this community. They worked hard, just like everyone else, to create a better life. Not just for themselves, but for future generations." Mrs. Harper's expression faltered slightly, but Snoop continued, his voice gaining strength. "My grandfather fought in World War II, risking his life for this country. When he came back, he wasn't treated like a hero. He couldn't sit at the same counters or drink from the same fountains as other people, but he stayed. He stayed because he believed in the promise of this country, even when it didn't believe in him. A hush fell over the room. The weight of Snoop's words hung in the air, touching everyone who heard them. "My parents," he said, his tone softening but losing none of its conviction, "taught me to respect everyone, no matter where they're from or what they look like. They taught me that strength isn't about raising your voice. It's about standing tall in the face of ignorance and hate." Snoop's gaze never wavered as he looked directly at Mrs. Harper. "So when you tell me I don't belong here, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting my family. You're insulting everyone who has fought for equality and justice in this country." The room was utterly silent. Even the hum of the refrigerators seemed to fade away. Mrs. Harper's face flushed, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her cart. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but found no words. Snoop took a step back, his composure unshaken. "I could have walked away," he said, addressing the crowd now. "But silence doesn't change anything. It's up to all of us to stand up, to speak out, and to be better than this." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound growing louder as more people joined in. Mrs. Harper, now visibly flustered, turned and hurried toward the exit, her head down. Snoop stood for a moment, his eyes scanning the faces around him. He nodded once, then picked up his basket and continued his shopping as if nothing had happened. But everyone in that store knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would stay with them long after the moment had passed. Outside, as the sun began to set over Long Beach, the story was already spreading. People shared what they had seen, not just as gossip, but as a lesson, a reminder of the power of words, the strength of character, and the importance of standing up for what's right. If you like our story, don't forget to like it, and please don't forget to follow our channel and turn on notifications to be informed about such stories, so you will be instantly informed about all the stories and you will not miss it. Today's story was like this. I am very excited for the next story. Remember that these stories are completely imaginary and for entertainment purposes, and do not reflect the truth in any way. Presents endless stories, regards, and love. I hope 2025 will be a good year for all of us. Love you all. Don't forget to follow.